All right. Hey, everyone. It's Tyler Flagg with Flying Company. This is episode 3, week 3 of the Gouge series. I am talking to Mark today. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
Doing very, very good. So, all right, we are going to be talking about maintenance and specifically maintenance planning. So, my kind of, experience with this historically has been minimal. In the military, you've got a maintenance squadron, you've got the maintainers that, this is the stuff that they handle, right? You use the pilot, you're checking the paperwork before the flight. You may be, doing a debrief or hot wash with them after you get done if there's any squawks. But in terms of the actual like planning of maintenance, that was not something that I was particularly, involved in, right? But then in the Part 91 world, that is not the case. If you were the chief pilot, like you need to be on top of this stuff because at the end of the day, it falls on you if the plane is not airworthy and not in a position to be able to take the principal where they need to go. Very high level overview. Can you just explain what maintenance planning is from your perspective?
Yeah. So, the business jet maintenance programs are pretty complex. There can be hundreds of different tasks that need to be done at different intervals. And so the planning process is looking out, 2 to 3 years in advance, being able to kind of plan maintenance events so that you know when your aircraft is going to be down, how long to expect the downtime to be, and be able to budget for those visits as well.
Okay. And so, a single aircraft operation, maybe it's the chief pilot who is in charge of this. You get into a bigger fleet, they might have a director of maintenance and an actual maintenance team. How do the pilots and the DOM like work together in those situations?
Yeah, so at that point, communication is major. You as the pilot are trusting your DOM to handle all of the planning and managing the maintenance projects. Obviously, there's a big difference between whether you're doing maintenance in-house versus outsourcing it. Kind of the concept is the same. The maintenance projects are pretty hard lined where when maintenance needs to be done, it needs to be done. So the maintenance team and the pilots need to be communicating to know when the aircraft is going to be down, and the pilots need to understand that that's kind of non-negotiable.
Yeah. So you brought up, taking the plane elsewhere for maintenance, vice doing it in-house. How does that decision typically get made within an organization? Like, what are the pros and cons of doing it like that?
Sure, and that comes down to kind of the organization size. If you've got a team of multiple technicians in-house, you can do a vast majority of inspections that are due. But for like the smaller departments where they don't have any maintenance personnel, they're outsourcing everything. But a lot of the maintenance departments, the corporate departments, they're kind of doing a balance of both, where they'll have, a tech or two in-house that does most of the small stuff, and then they'll outsource the major projects.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And so they're looking at that planning and they're making a determination like, all right, these are the inspections that we can do here. These are the inspections that we need to outsource.
Yep, exactly. And it comes down to tooling and manpower. It might be something that two guys could do, but it'll take 3 times as long as sending it out to a shop.
Got it. Got it. And how is the determination made in terms of what maintenance facility we take the planes to, right? Is it just based off of the model and the manufacturer? Like, is it just like, hey, any old A&P can do these inspections, but the other ones need to go to the big places? They like, what's the thought process like when they're determining those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it just comes down to capabilities. You might prefer like a 145 repair station that you can see their capabilities and you know what they normally work on. Certainly, any A&P can work on a business jet, but your organization might require drug and alcohol testing, or you might require certain documents and things like that. So that's a big determination. Beyond that, relationships are big. If you're familiar with a shop already, that's a big step forward. But otherwise, the best way to go about it is just to collect multiple quotes from different shops and be able to compare and contrast and see which ones have an open time slot that works for you and can prioritize either your cost or your downtime, whichever is more important to your organization.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So a lot of manufacturers, it seems like they're going towards like a, 600 hours, 12-month kind of thing. The 12-month being the calendar based, inspection requirements. The 600 hours obviously being the hours based requirements. Then kind of like whatever comes first. How do you see that broken down? Is it like some manufacturers just have this kind of like more simplified process? Other ones have a lot of smaller inspections that are due like throughout the year. Like, just speaking in generalities, like how do you see that operating?
Yeah, it does. It varies widely by the manufacturer. Like citation jets often have a ton of little smaller tasks that have different intervals to them. And you can really group them together or spread them out however you want. Some of the other manufacturers, they have more like set 12, 24, 36-month larger inspection packages.
Got it. And let's talk about like what's an example of like one of those kind of like the citation ones, like one of those smaller things that like might get missed, like if people are not planning accordingly, and then like what is the cost of that, like missing one of those smaller ones?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, missing an inspection is huge. I know it tends to be a little bit of ambiguity in Part 91 where, people kind of go, well, we're Part 91. We don't necessarily have to stick to the maintenance program. But especially with a lot of the smaller like dock inspections on a citation that are recurring frequently, you might have a 6 or 12 month recurring task. And if your tracking software or if you're using a spreadsheet and somehow that falls through the cracks, now you're suddenly non-compliant. And that can have big ramifications if you have an accident and the insurance company finds out that you're late on an inspection, that can have huge ramifications.
Got it. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the calendar based inspections, the hours based inspections, some of the other just kind of terminology here. So component life limits. What do we mean when we say that?
Yeah, so that's individual components on the aircraft are going to have their own limits for replacement or overhaul. So let's give a generator as an example, might have like 1,000-hour overhaul limit where you need to pull that component off and either replace it with a new one or send it out for overhaul.
Got it. Service bulletins versus airworthiness directives. What are the differences there from a maintenance perspective?
Yeah, on a high level, it's just the service bulletins are put out by the manufacturer, and those can vary in criticality, but an airworthiness directive is from the FAA, and you have no choice but to comply with that.
Yeah. When you talk about like there's different maybe like levels of the service bulletins, like how are those typically classified, so that the pilot like is able to triage, this is the most important.
Yeah, and different manufacturers have different ways of signifying the importance of them, but you have anywhere from like advisory service bulletins up to mandatory service bulletins, which is just barely a step below an AD. Usually that'll end up becoming an AD down the road.
Got it. Okay. So talking about the facilities again, what are your different options if you are owning and operating a plane in terms of, the different kind of levels like of maintenance facility that you can.
So the biggest distinction that you're going to see is whether it's a certified repair station. So Part 145 repair station just has more stringent requirements. They have more oversight from the FAA. It doesn't necessarily make a shop better. You have a lot of smaller shops that just don't go through the certification process that are fantastic maintenance facilities, but it all depends on kind of what your priorities are.
Got it. Okay. So you mentioned spreadsheets, like people are probably familiar with CAMP. There's other options out there in terms of, the place where all of the maintenance information lives. And, as a pilot, familiarizing yourself at least a little bit with, the software like CAMP is obviously really important. But you mentioned spreadsheets. I'm sure there's a lot of different ways that people track things. Like, what do you see currently, and what are some of the problems with doing things like that?
Yeah, these days, a majority of operators are going to have some kind of maintenance tracking software. But I do come across a lot of, especially like the owner pilot groups, where they're still tracking everything on a spreadsheet or on a whiteboard or, a scrap piece of paper or something. It can be frustrating for anybody trying to step in and help with the planning process.
And what do you see as the main thing that pilots or aircraft managers or owner operators, like what is the main thing that they miss, and like the biggest mistakes that you see when it comes to like appropriate maintenance planning?
I think one of the biggest things is not being prepared for the really big events, something like an engine hot section or overhaul. If you're not prepared to have the aircraft down for 3, 4, 5 weeks or more for a hot section or overhaul or something major like that, you need to have your ducks in a row and have a rental engine ready to go or something like that as a backup plan. So you're not just sitting there waiting for your airplane. But a lot of people are kind of caught off guard by that.
Got it. And then also just the massive costs
And the
of those,
cost,
right?
yeah.
And like having to have planned in advance, like that, okay, I'm setting aside X amount of money for this
Right,
big thing.
right.
Yeah. Okay, great. And so, all right. So recently you have been building your own solution for this. Can you talk a little bit more about the genesis of that, and the value that that provides to the owner operator, the chief pilot, to just kind of stay on top of this stuff?
Yeah, so the Aloft Evermore Maintenance Manager software is a tool kind of specifically geared toward the smaller flight departments, the owner pilots that are managing their own aircraft without having a director of maintenance or a maintenance team in-house. And oftentimes it can be a struggle for them to have a good handle on things, or they're relying on an outside source, a shop or someone to tell them when things are coming due. So what our software does is it kind of acts as a director of maintenance while still allowing the owner or the chief pilot to maintain control. So everything from forecasting out up to 3 years in advance to see what projects are going to be coming up, to getting quotes from multiple shops and being able to quickly compare and contrast them, all the way through reviewing the maintenance paperwork after a project is complete. The software tool makes that kind of streamlined and easier for you.
Got it. That's great. So we're getting pretty close to time. The one question that I have is you mentioned like shopping around to different maintenance facilities for to be able to obviously get the best price, get the best situation for the principal. What are the main drivers that you see in the cost differences across the board from different maintenance facilities?
Yeah, it just varies so widely based on shop rate per hour. Everybody has their kind of own individual pricing structure. And then on top of it, there are a lot of hidden costs and fees, consumable fees, overtime, additional costs, things like that. And it's just, how they determine how long a project is going to take.
Got it.
And so one quote to another can be a difference of tens of thousands of dollars even sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. So final parting shot. If there was like one piece of advice that you would give me 4 years ago, as a brand new Part 91 chief pilot who knows nothing about maintenance, if there's one piece of advice you could give to protect them from, running into any issues with maintenance planning, like what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of rehashing what I mentioned earlier, but looking way out in advance. You need to know what's coming at least 2 or 3 years out into the future. If you're only looking 6 months out, you're going to miss a major event and you're not going to be prepared for it.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Man, where can people find more about you and what you've been building?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find Aloft Evermore there as well, or aloftevermore.com. That's Evermore with no E at the end. It's just MOR at the end.
Awesome. Thank you, man. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks so much. Bye.